let's talk about shadows and hunters. So you're probably first thinking, where am I? Well, I am currently on a trip visiting my family in California, and I figured I'd bring all my equipment here. And it seemed that my parents also had some equipment that I could use. But yeah, so if you're wondering about the background or this, that is why. But today I wanted to really hone in on a very particular genre. You may have heard of it, you may have even seen things about it. This genre is one of my favorites to watch, and a very interesting one, very niche, and that is Shadows and Hunters. It's a genre that, in terms of examples, comes in the form of usually a monster hunter or some kind of warrior that protects both the human world and the supernatural one, often battling against the threats in the supernatural world and keeping back these forces of evil from entering into the normal one. And in terms of examples, there are actually plenty. When I started diving into what kinds of stories would be in this kind of category or genre, I don't know why I don't just use that, I found that there were quite a few. Mostly in TV shows and movies, but there's a few in books, video games, and even comic books. Now, the ones that I was able to find and that a lot of you might even recognize are things like The Last Witch Hunter, Hellboy, Constantine, the Dresden Files, the TV show Grimm, the TV show Supernatural, and even things like Underworld, I Frankenstein, Van Helsing. The list keeps going on and on. Now, in terms of similarities, there's actually quite a few between all of these stories. Often the enemy or monsters that these hunters are fighting or keeping back tend to be things like werewolves, vampires, the undead. A lot of them it's demons or creatures like wendigos and dark sorcerers and powerful beings, all kinds of dark and evil forces, and they're not all evil. In some of these stories, these other worlds are simply, they have some good witches or werewolves or vampires, and then in the other part of it, they have, well, the terrible ones, the ones killing off people. And then in some of these worlds, the majority of these other creatures and beings tend to be evil. The other type of aspect or theme that comes into play is not just the dark warrior or the supernatural world, but a secret society or ancient order that helps the dark warrior to be able to perform their tasks. The dark warrior tends to be brought in, adopted even by the secret society, raised up, trained, and sometimes this secret society isn't necessarily all good. A good example of this is actually in Underworld with Kate Beckinsale's character Anna. She works for the Order of Vampires, and even though vampires and werewolves in Underworld fight each other all the time, there's kind of a loose sense of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. Of course, in Anna's mind, it's the vampires. The vampires are the good guys of the story. But that's not necessarily true, because of course, the werewolves are victims in some ways, and the vampires also could be the enemy or victims. It kind of goes back and forth. We see it constantly throughout all these stories. This constant idea of, are these characters good? Are these characters bad? Most of them, of course, are pretty obvious. We see in Van Helsing, when Hugh Jackman's character, well, Van Helsing, is hunting these monsters and these evil characters, he tends to be the good guy, of course, but you see also some vulnerability in some of the scenes where his character is realizing that he would like to be saving more lives because he knows that they're not all like monsters or bad people. Characters like Mr. Hyde or Dr. Jekyll that he fights in the first part of the movie it's possible that he himself is a victim of his own like psychosis, and so there's a possibility of a reason for sparing his life. And Van Helsing ends up sparing the life of Frankenstein, or Frankenstein's monster, whose name, I don't think he actually has a name in the movie, but Van Helsing, either way, tries to be kind of a savior, not just a killer. And a lot of these characters, like Hellboy, like Nick from Grimm, and the brothers from Supernatural, they tend to be characters that aren't just trying to kill monsters. There is a human and moral compass within them that is trying to navigate this dark and shadowy world. Now, as we kind of dissect the rest of this genre of fiction, one thing kind of stood out to me. Not all the main characters are quite the same, but they do fall under some certain categories. And so I kind of took it upon myself to name these 3 categories. So these 3 different kinds of main character, protagonist, hero, whatever you want to call it, these 3 archetypes are, well, as follows. The first one is the cursed hero. The cursed hero is a archetype I feel like is pretty common in this form of fiction. You see it with characters like Hellboy, or the Vin Diesel's character in The Last Witch Hunter, where they are characters that are doing good for this like society. In The Last Witch Hunter, I believe it's the Crossed, or the Cross, I think is what they're called. And in Hellboy, of course, it's a part of the supernatural government department that is trying to keep back these evil forces and trying to like ensure the safety of humanity. With his character, we find that at the end of the movie, and this is a spoiler alert, so watch at your own expense, that he is actually the reason why the Witch Queen, who he killed, or who he thought he killed years ago, is still alive. It turns out that as long as the heart of the Witch Queen is still beating, Vin Diesel's character is still alive and he's immortal. He can just regenerate, he can survive anything that's thrown at him, and that's why one of the men who found his dead, burning corpse that was still alive spared his life and hid the witch's heart. And it's kind of he becomes kind of a victim because of it, which we'll get into an archetype that's like that in a moment. But Hellboy's kind of a similar thing. Technically, he's also linked to the bad guys. Like Vin Diesel's character in The Last Witch Hunter, Hellboy is also connected to evil, for it's prophesied that Hellboy will bring about the end of the world, and he will help his father, who is also a high-level demon in hell, to bring about the end of days. It's spoken of in the movies, the comics, pretty much everything. And it's kind of referenced that Hellboy himself, even though he's trying to do good and he does care about being more of a hero and kind of doing his own thing, he like underlining deep within, he knows he is kind of meant to be the bad guy, but he tries to attempt to defy the odds through that throughout the entire story. There are tons of examples of the cursed hero, but the next archetype I would also mention is the victim hunter. The hunter who is a victim in all of this. We see it with Kate I butchered her name. Kate Beckinsale's, I still don't know if I said that right, but Anna in Underworld, we find that her character is devoted to the vampires. She was turned into a vampire after she was told by the Lord Vampire of the Order that werewolves killed her parents. With Anna's character, though, in Underworld, she discovers later on that from the werewolves, she learns that the vampire lord is actually the one who killed her parents and turned her into a vampire. And this brings out, of course, a lot of wrath and anger, and she ends up killing, in a very cool, badass way, the vampire lord, cutting his head off, clean, just vertical. But it adds to her character, and it brings out more of this human connection between the audience and the characters in the story. We also see it with characters like in Blade or in Supernatural, where the characters have a troubled past. They lost someone close to them, or they've kind of been wronged in some way. The only other archetype I wanted to really talk about before we kind of wrap things up too is the last one is what I call the divergent warrior. Characters like Van Helsing or Nick in Grimm, or even Dresden in the Dresden Files, are those kinds of characters that upset the balance of the order of things. Van Helsing, like I said before, his order wants characters like the Frankenstein's monster to be killed because they're unnatural and are kind of taboo in society. But Van Helsing goes out of his way to try to find any monster he can to save, to the best of his abilities, and he ends up sparing that monster's life, even though the order would have him kill it. Nick in Grimm is a Grimm. He can see creatures known as Vessin that are kind of humanoid animal people that disguise themselves as humans to live in society, and he is told to kill them because he's a Grimm. It's a part of his ancestry. But instead, especially in the modern world, he decides to spare a lot of them and try to rehabilitate them, or just put them in prison, or even befriend them and creates a small group with them. A lot of characters in these stories are victims of these two worlds clashing against each other, while at the same time they are the hope of this world. And I think the reason why we really like these stories is, one, we love to see a badass, but the only way we care about a badass doing anything is what made them become this hardened shelled dark warrior fighting evil. And it's because they've experienced things like us, lies from people they trusted, being told that they are nothing more than evil, but overcoming that evil and rising to the occasion. The biggest theme of this kind of story is overcoming the darkness within, becoming something more than what society tells you you are, or what you're meant to be. And in essence, that's why we love this form of storytelling. We like characters that show the best of humanity, even though they're not humans. We like seeing them overcome the trials that we face every day. We like putting ourselves in their shoes and feeling that sense of vigor and victory in overcoming the very evil and dark shudder to pass that we seek to overcome. All in all, it's one of my favorite stories, and I think the message of it all is you can always overcome the nature, the past, or even the destiny people claim you're meant to be. But in the end, you have the choice and the agency to being able to overcome any darkness. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe and comment down below what you thought of this genre of fiction, and as well, if you want to see a particular form of fiction, whether it's hidden or something that is common but you want to hear it talked about more, please leave a comment down below and I'll see what I can do. As well, if you enjoy this particular form of fiction, Shadows and Hunters, there are a couple of stories I've made in the Tales of the Verse, which is my YouTube series I've made, that is an audio immersive series. So please track them down. One of them is called Headhunters, and the other one, I believe, is the Ballad of Dr. Death. So, thank you for watching. Love you guys so much. Thank you for your support and everything. And I'll see you on the other side of the gates.